Hey everybody, I just wanted to start this video by kind of explaining what it's about. Basically, I built a little WebGL engine where you can set up scenes and do a whole bunch of stuff. I'll get to that. I just wanted to say thanks for checking it out, and this video is going to be explaining how to use it. There are probably plenty of bugs, so if you run into them, please let me know. I'm happy to fix them, and yeah, let's get started with the video. Okay, so the first thing is let's go to the website. So the website is constructionyard.ca, and inside of here you just click on Refinery. Refinery is the application. These other two are just two other things I was working on, but this here is where we're going to go. So the full path is constructionyard.ca/pound/refinery, and inside of here you'll see right away that we're greeted with this nice little scene. So to begin, let's go over the controls inside of the scene itself. If we hold the right mouse button and move the mouse, we can see that we move the the camera around in the scene. If we press W, we go forward. If we press S, we go backwards. If we press A, we go left. If we press D, we go to the right. And you can hold them down and we can move around. If we click on objects in the scene, we select those objects, we highlight them. And yeah, so that's kind of the basic controls of how we're going to move around and control the scene. Let's go over to what we can do. So what we can do first is let's select this cube, and we'll start just from the top. One of the first things that we can do is we can set the cube to have a parent. So we can set this thing's parent to be the child, we can set it to be the child of this temporary mesh. Now you can see that it moved to where this mesh is. That's because it's taking on the identity of its transformations. So really, probably what we want to do is we want to set it to go away. We want to move this maybe, let's move the cube a couple ways that way. And now let's set it to be the child of the mesh. And you can see that there's a gap now between the two. If we click on the mesh quickly, just to prove that it is now a child-parent relationship, as we move the parent, the child moves with it. Let's go back to the cube. So we've seen, let's unset that so that we can kind of tell what's going on. We've seen that we can move the position in the Y, X, and Z directions. We can scale the cube outwards or upwards or that way in the Z direction. All these scales happen about the centroid of this object, meaning the center of the vertices. So if we unscale this back, you can see that right now I haven't been keeping track of the scale. I'm just leaving the number at 1 because it's kind of arbitrary. We can see the scale for ourselves. Maybe in the future I might keep track and do it nicely. I was just being lazy. Same thing goes for the rotation. So we can rotate about the x-axis, so you can see we can hold it down. We can rotate about the y-axis, we can rotate about the z-axis, and again, I leave the numbers as 0 because it's arbitrary, and I don't really care how many times I've rotated it. That might change, but yeah. Here's another control. First, let me quickly turn off the texture so that we can see. So here, we can set the color of our cube, so if we want it to be kind of a purple, we can set that. And here is the shininess value. This is just how shiny this is going to appear in our scene. So you can see that as I increase this, it's kind of hard to tell, but if we were to rotate it now, you can kind of tell a little bit here that the shininess is indeed having an effect. Let's go here. That's probably a better angle that we can see this being applied to. So let's set this to something like 70. You can see is slightly different than something like 1. It's very lit. Next up, let's set this back to about 50 so it makes sense for this cube. Next up, we can apply a diffuse texture. So we can see that if we take a closer look, the texture, right now I have one single texture that can be applied, and it's just these bricks. That's okay. The reason I used one is because I will show you as we get later into this tutorial that we're actually able to change this for our own individual games or whatever it is that we're building. The second thing we can do, and let's change this actually back to a nice white so that we can see our shape. We can add a normal texture. So what the normal texture does, and it might be hard to see with a shininess value of that much, but let's make it a little bit more, maybe around 5. So it's kind of hard to tell. So if we actually take it to the floor, let's switch to the floor really quick. The floor has a normal texture applied to it, which means that we can see, as we change this shininess a little bit, we can see that it looks like we have a nice kind of physical looking object, like these bricks are actually here, when in fact we're just using a normal texture that is being applied over top of the bricks. And again, as of right now, there's only a single texture, both for diffuse and for normal, and I'll show you later how we can change that. So next up, we can clone objects. So if we select our cube and we clone it, you can see that right away we get an object called temp cube clone. Maybe we'll just call this 2, so we can change the name. I forgot to mention that. We can change the name. And then let's go ahead and move that, and you can see that now we have 2 of the exact same object, but they're completely separate from each other. The other thing we can do is we can select the old cube and we can delete it. And as you can see, it deletes, but the new cube is still there. If, for example, if this had its parent set to this mesh over here, and we deleted the parent, it will just delete the parent relationship, the link, and move it back to its original position. And I think this right here is very experimental. This, what it can do is, we saw earlier, let's quickly, actually, I'll get to that. I'll get to this here in a second. First, let me go over how we would create a new object. So we go into our actions item, we can click add new object. We can say new mesh, and let's select the type of a mesh and let's add it. So as you can see, a bunny gets added, and similarly to the texture, there's only one type of mesh that we can have right now, and that's the bunny. In the future, I might add the ability to upload more meshes. I just wanted to leave it with one, and I'll show you how to edit that when you're building your game or whatever. Again, the same things apply to the mesh. We can edit its shininess value. You know, we can set it to 100 if we want, and you can see how that affects it. We can give it a diffuse texture. I'm not sure why you might apply texture to a mesh, but hey, by all means. You can also apply a normal texture to it as well, which might look a little strange. But the point is, you can do the exact same things with a mesh as you can do with a cube or a plane. And now what I was going to explain is, as you can see, if I set this cube that we created, if I set its parent to the mesh, it doesn't move because this right now hasn't been scaled, it hasn't been rotated, and it's in the origin. Now if we unset it, and then we go back to the mesh, so let's click on the rabbit. If we scale this out like this, and we skew it, and now we say that this cube's parent is the mesh, you'll see that this actually transforms in a similar fashion. But Zach, wait, what if I want this cube to be this child of this object, and I don't want it to scale? That's kind of what this button is for right here, this save as object type. What that does is if I select the bunny, and I save as an object type, it creates a brand new type that this bunny has its rotation and its scale reset to 0. And now if I take this and I set this as the child of the bunny, you can see that it didn't move. But now we can definitely confirm, if we rotate, there we go, we can confirm that there is a relationship between these two. Don't worry if that doesn't make a lot of sense right now. That's just kind of how parent-child relationships work in certain games. Anyways, so let's go ahead and delete this. Let's delete this, and I just want to show one more thing. Let's add an object. Let's add a new cube, and it's going to be a type of cube. The other thing we can do in the engine is we can also, and this is very, right now I actually fixed it. I'm not sure why it was buggy, but it's been fixed as of yesterday. You can change the transparency. It's a little funky right now, but like I said, it is working on the local build, and by the time you guys use this, the transparency should be fixed. So I apologize for not being able to show that super well. There we go. So you can kind of tell that, yeah, it's a little buggy. It does work in the production build. That will be available. I will push the changes tonight, and that should be available for you guys when you use it. The last thing I wanted to show you really quick, let's go ahead and scale up this plane really far so that we can see, like, really big. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to go over, well, not last thing, there's a couple more things, so I'm sorry, I lied to you. One of the last things is let's add a new light, and let's call this light 2. Now, in our scene, we can have multiple lights, and as you can see, if we move the light over here, and then we increase the strength, And we can even change the color of our lights. So if we want our light to be green, we can do that. Don't worry about the shadow and this near plane and far plane. These are things that I was using when I was building the light. This button will not work, this save as object type. If anything, it will probably cause it to crash. And I just realized that it's still here for the light. So I should probably get rid of that. But the point is, yeah, you can definitely set a light and you can do things with it and so on and so forth. It looks like clone is also not working, so just be careful. Delete works apparently with the lights. If we delete all our lights, the scene is black. So anyways, let's add another light back to the scene. So now we can see our light. Let's go to our light and let's increase the strength a bit and let's bring it up. All right, perfect. So you can see that as we change the color of the light, you can see it take effect on the cube because the cube is white. If we set this to be, you know, a very dark color or something, you can see that the power of that change is not necessarily totally reflected. So this should be really green. It looks a little greeny red because of that. Anyways, that's not super important. All that you need to know is that you can do things like that. Now, the other thing that is somewhat important is the scene settings button. So this right here can allow us to change our background to different colors. So if we want to, we can change our background to be more red, and let's save it. So you can see that now the background of our scene is red. And that's just a solid color. It's totally up to you, depending on what you want your scene to look like. Maybe we actually want to add a little bit of this. It might look purple. Yeah, okay, that looks good. We want a purple background. The next thing is if you want to physically change. I don't highly recommend doing physical changes with the camera, but you can set, you know, hard values to your camera. It might do funky things, and you might end up with strange working cameras. As you can see, I can't really look properly because I don't have it set up properly. But you can, if you really are wanting to, you can set your camera to do whatever it is you want it to do. Lastly, there's a skybox option. This is not functioning currently. It might in the future, but it's not something that I've implemented yet. Okay, so I think I've gone over a little bit of what the website can do. And now you're asking, well, why did you make this? Well, a big reason I made it is for the following. So two things here that are extremely important. First is, let's say we want our scene, wow, you know what, let's add another object. And let's add a bunny. And let's just go like this, and we'll go whoosh, and let's move it out of the middle of our scene so that it's not, you know, right smack in the middle. And just for the sake of our eyes, let's set the light to be something kind of more natural. Maybe a yellowy light. Okay, so what we can do now is we can actually go ahead and say download our scene. And you'll see it's 4 because I've downloaded it a bunch of times. But we can download our scene as a JSON file. This JSON file contains all the information that the engine needs to rebuild this scene. The website does not remember your scenes. There's no login, there's no anything like that. So if we refresh the page, you'll see that it resets back to that same old boring scene that we were at in the beginning. However, if we go to upload existing scene and we go to our downloads and click on scene 4, you'll see that it loads up our scene exactly the exact same way that it was before. And you know, if you're really curious, you can rotate stuff and you can try to whatever and download it and so on and so forth. But the idea being that you set up your scene, you download it. Oh crap, I actually wanted to make a change. I wanted to put a wall over here and I wanted to put another plane over here. You can, and then you can re-upload it. And the really cool part is this will also save things like the camera position, the background of the scene. So if we change this, let's you know, let's save it to black again, and then if we go, you know, download this scene and we refresh, so we want to keep 5. Your browser might yell at you. Don't worry, it's not a virus, I promise. And if we upload our existing scene and we go to 5, you can see that the camera angle is preserved and so is the background. So it's a really nice way of just, you know, I don't have to hold on to your information. I don't have to find a way to store it, and you can just easily upload it. So the last piece of the puzzle is downloading this WebGL template. So if you download this WebGL template, it's a zip, and I'll just show you quickly how to use it. Let's open it, and you can use WinRAR or WinZip or whatever it is that you use to unpack your compressed files. Now I am going to open up Visual Studio Code. This is what I use for all my stuff. Let's go to the desktop, and it's under Refinery Template. Let's open this up. And you'll see that inside of here, there's a bunch of different things. And I'll explain, actually, maybe I should just open the folder. It might be easier to explain in the folder view. All right, so inside of here, we have lib. Lib just contains the libraries that this engine will use, so GL matrix and 3-object loader. Materials contains a bunch of materials that I used when I was building it. You can throw away as many of these as you want. You can keep as many as you want. Doesn't matter to me. I won't be upset. There's models. Lots of these models I just kind of included. Again, there's like an alien and stuff like that. I'll just quickly show you. So there's a couple cool models in here that I got off the internet when I was building my engine. You don't need to use any of those. You can add whichever ones you want. We'll get to source. State files is where we're going to put the file that we downloaded that represents our basically the thing that we just downloaded. So let's go ahead and put this in here. This is really important. Make sure that you name this to be scene.json. No 5, no 3, no 2, nothing like that. It has to be named scene.json, and it needs to be inside of the state files folder. Now inside of here, if we open up a PowerShell, or if you're on Mac or Linux, if we open up a terminal and we run Pi, or in, again, Mac or Linux, it might be Python 3. We can go -m HTTP server like this. Now we're hosting all the files in here on a local port. So, and it says 8,000. So let's go to our browser and let's go ahead and go to localhost 8,000. Now you can see that this has loaded a little strangely, but that's okay. You can see that the far plane is cutting off the plane that we drew because we actually scaled it so large. But the scene remains the same, more or less the same. That was a really weird example. I didn't realize that scaling this plane that large would do that. So let's go ahead and delete that. Let's go down and delete the plane. We'll add a, sorry, let me maximize this. Let's add a new object, and this is good practice for us to see just how we would use this. So the plane has been added, and we probably need to scale it to be able to see it. There it is. Okay, let's scale it out a bunch. Whoops, Y is not going to do anything because it's 2D. Okay, and then let's move it down in the Y position, and then let's give it a texture just for good measure. And then what we'll say is, now let's go ahead and download our scene. That's okay, we're going to keep it. If we go to our downloads and we grab scene 6 now, and then we go into our folder, into state files. This is again on the desktop. We'll delete this scene.json, we'll paste this one, and we'll rename it to be scene.json. And then if we go to our browser here where we're hosting and we refresh, we can see that now the plane is all there because we made it small enough. I will be removing these camera controls. That's at the request of Dana. She doesn't want you guys to have those controls. She wants you to be able to figure that out on your own. But as you can see, it's very plain. It doesn't render the exact same as my engine. Well, that's on purpose. I don't want to give you guys the answers of how to render a texture, how to render a color or something like that. And I'll quickly go through the code with you. So inside, and again, lots of this code is subject to change because it might change before you guys get this assignment. This is what it is as of, what's today? As of November 4th, but the code could change. It could remove some stuff, it could add some stuff, so I'm not going to show you all the code. But essentially, inside of here, I'm going to add plenty of comments for you. But you have a basic, very basic vertex and fragment shader that's just outputting the diffuse color, which makes sense why it looks like this. But it's also doing a nice MVP multiplication on the A position buffer. That's why it looks the exact same as the engine, as far as the way that it's situated. Down here, this is just going over our objects and using built-in classes that I've given you guys. So I've given you a cube class, I've given you a model class, I've given you a plane class, and you will have access to these. That's something that I did talk to Dana about. You will have access to these planes and these cubes and models and any other classes that I use. I won't show you my game or scene functions because these are ways that I currently have been controlling the camera. You will have access to this common functions file. This just has, you know, how do I load a shader? How do I calculate the centroid? How do I init position attributes, so on and so forth. These are functions that you're probably familiar with. How do we get a texture? Those kind of things. The point is, when I give this to you, I'll add to-dos, I'll add comments so that you know where you can start writing code to make your game. And really the sky's the limit. It's up to you guys how you want to add your game or your logic and things like that. But the important part that I'll show you right now is, well, you know, you're saying, Zach, hey, you know, I really want to apply a new texture to, or a new model. I don't like that bunny model. It's so boring. And I agree. If we go back, you can see the bunny's cool, but we can actually go into our models folder and let's do a really quick experiment. Let's go to Google Poly. And this is just a website where we can download a 3D model. Let's just go, there's a cool Star Trek one I kind of liked. Is it this one? Let's have a look. You know what? Let's go, I like Geordie LaForge, blocky Geordie LaForge. And let's go ahead, we can download the OBJ file. We download it. So now if we open this, you'll get something like this. Whoops, where did it go? You'll get something like this, and what we're going to do is, let's move that over there. Let's bring up the folder that we were in on the desktop. Again, this is on the desktop. We can go to models, and let's drag the model in here, and let's name it Geordie, so I know which one I'm dealing with. And now if I come in here and I rename this to be Geordie, and then we go to our scene, let's go back, let's get rid of Geordie, and I refresh the page. You can see, I'll run the camera over there really quick. You can see that it is in fact Geordie LaForge flipped over. I can't show you necessarily the texture stuff right now because the shader doesn't currently render textures, but the concept is the same. If you wanted a diffuse texture that's different than what you currently have in the model, by all means go to materials and use the file name of material. So for example, if I didn't want default, I could change this to be apple. And when this would render, it would render the apple texture on top of that object. My point is, this scene.json file is generated by my engine to conveniently help you build your scene, but because I only have a couple of textures and I only have a couple of models, like the bunny and the two textures, you need to go in afterwards and add those yourself. So the reason I would suggest, what my idea of it is, name your objects in a way that it makes sense so that later when you need to go look at them and find them, you can, and then you can change those textures so that when you load it in your game, you can see your textures show up however you'd like. So I hope that answers a bunch of questions. I know it's complicated. I wrote it myself. You know, it steals a lot of the ideas from game engines like Unity and Unreal and stuff like that. It's not really a game engine, it's more like a scene setupper, if you will, with a template built for you. But you can definitely contact me. I will put my, you should have my contact information from Dana. And then feel free to also comment on this video if you have any questions, and I'm really happy to help. But anyways, I hope this has helped, and I will talk to you guys next time.